Good afternoon and welcome to the Federal Executive Forum celebrating 19 years of profiling excellence in government IT mission programs. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss progress and best practices with customer experience programs and strategies in the federal government. With me on today's show are Mo Early, High Impact Service Provider Portfolio Lead, Federal CX Office of Management and Budget; Amanda Damewood, Director of User Experience, United States Citizenship and Immigration Service; Ariel Faber, Chief Experience Officer, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services; Karen Tuttle, Director of Digital Experience, Verizon; and Charlotte Lee, Customer Experience and Innovation Strategy Executive at Granicus. We're talking customer experience. We had an executive order, it's been 2 years ago. $100 million set aside in the TMF to prime the pump. A lot of sophisticated conversation and activities going on, including all the way up to how do you measure customer experience. Mo, let's start with you. You're in the catbird seat. You're looking across the interagency. Give us a top line. What are you seeing these days?
So zooming all the way out, I'll start by emphasizing that the Biden-Harris administration is building a government that works for all Americans, and both service delivery and customer experience contribute to this every day. Government must provide excellent customer experience. This means working to meet people where they are, and we believe that every interaction with government should be simple, seamless, and secure. And as you alluded to, it's an incredibly exciting time for federal CX. We closed out 2023 celebrating two major milestones in the CX world, which were the 2-year anniversaries of both the president's management agenda and the CX executive order being signed by the president. So we were very happy to mark these milestones at a celebration alongside some of my fellow panelists here and the broader federal CX community, and by sharing these updates and achievements and commitments publicly on performance.gov. So from where I sit at OMB, some of our most significant markers of progress are the growth of federal CX and the very concrete improvements this community delivers for its customers, the American public. So for example, last year, we saw the IRS reduce call wait times from an average of 28 minutes to 3 minutes at their contact center. Another is that SSA completely redesigned their website to elevate the top tasks that people are trying to complete, making it easier and less burdensome. So while those may seem like small improvements, to individual people, these saved minutes and reduced burdens add up to be really meaningful differences that people can feel, and it bolsters trust in government. So progress also looks like seeing more and more agencies commit to service delivery by including customer experience within their agency priority goals. And finally, on the digital side, just a few months ago, the Office of the Federal Chief Information Officer at OMB released flagship digital experience guidance known casually as Memo M2322, or Delivering a Digital First Public Experience. And we work closely with them to support our high impact service providers, or HISPs, as we call them, to implement this guidance and ensure government services are available and accessible to all members of the public. The last thing I'll add is that more than 10 federal agencies are actually building out their CX teams and offices. So I think we're really starting to see CX take hold for the long haul in government.
Absolutely. You're seeing that across the board. It's very impressive. And you see inside these buildings, right? The policy, the procurement thought going into it, the measuring, et cetera. Amanda, let's go to you and talk about a very, very important topic, which is United States Citizenship and Immigration Services and all the activity around that.
Of course. So USCIS recently submitted our customer experience strategic plan to the Department of Homeland Security Headquarters Customer Experience Directorate, which I know you've had Dana Chisnell on the program as well. And this was an initiative that they stood up back in July, asking all of the component agencies here at DHS to submit something that would talk about how we're strategizing around customer experience and really cementing a vision within our component agencies to make this real, make this concrete. So our plan at USCIS focuses on improving customer experience coordination across the agency. We have plenty of customer experience tools and experience to set us up for success, but how are we getting really the most bang for our buck, if you will, out of making all of these investments that we've already made, whether that's bringing in tools, whether that's training staff, whether that's bringing in new staff. And so we have over 100 user experience designers in our IT shop. We have human-centered design specialists working in our humanitarian programs. And, we're working right now to stand up a Voice of the Customer program, but it's by putting all of this together that's going to help us get good conversations about what it means to continue to mature our practices. And by putting together that plan that was galvanized through DHS asking us to put together this strategy, we were really able to look around and sort of identify who the most ready partners are and who the folks are that really needed us to help hold hands and cross the finish line together to submit. And now we're in a phase where we're able to sort of do that work with the folks who did need that help. And we're starting to sort of look at the next phase, which is going around to the parts of the agency that were needing a little bit of help and really starting to look at training, look at extra contract support and things like that, and really building on our strengths and using our strengths to make sure that the whole of the agency is really ready to work this way.
That's fantastic. I love the harnessing of all the various activity that's underway, right? Policies are being made, equipment's being bought, systems are being built. But are we making sure that we're focused on the user, the experience from day one? Ariel, how about at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services? Regardless, very important activity. And I know you all have a lot of very passionate folks over there working on this effort.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much. So to build on my colleagues here, in particular, what Mo had teed up across government, CMS is within the Department of Health and Human Services. And what I'm most proud of in the last couple years at CMS is that we have really looked across our agency, not only with regards to customer experience as it relates to interacting with the public, but also internally, as Amanda was describing in her sphere, at the employee experience. And we've really, really worked hard to establish more consistent, connected, and sustainable experiences across the board. So building again on this federal vision for CX that Mo had mentioned, we want to make sure that whether we're delivering products, services, programs, policies, yes, they're simple, seamless, and secure. And even beyond that, in healthcare, we are interacting with people oftentimes in their most vulnerable state and in those moments that matter in their lives that are particularly private and personal. And so what we are really cognizant of is that to make this work last, to make sure that we are able to continue improving and delivering at our individual high impact service level. So we have 3 different services that are HISPs, Medicare Marketplace, the healthcare marketplace, as well as Medicaid. We are also pushing beyond that. And this year, we celebrate the launch at the department level at HHS in co-leading the first ever Advancing Customer Experience Agency Priority Goal. What this means is that we have been able to drive change in our culture, not only at our agency level in our operating division, but we have now elevated this need to really hardwire customer experience best practices internal to our workforce and externally. And one of the mechanisms we're using to do that is, and we're really excited about it, is actually at the department level so that we are able to share and scale the best practices that we have learned across every operating division in HHS over the coming years.
That's fantastic. HHS being an incredibly large organization there, and a good catch on there's also the employee experience that we want to make sure that we're focused on as well. Karen, how about at Verizon? When I think of Verizon, I think of my phone, I think of 5G, I think of fantastic technology that's out there in the customer's hand, by the way. Tell us about this digital experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, Verizon, from a wireless standpoint, has been involved with customer experience for a long time. That's kind of core to our business, right? And what I've seen as a major shift, it goes along the same sort of lines, as the colleagues have talked about, is the focus on employee experience. I think in previous years, it's been introducing, what are the self-service things that we can do? What are the automation we can do that are more customer facing? But what we really realize is when you actually need to interface with your customers hands-on, and that happens a lot, it's important, is giving the tools to the employees so that they can find the right information that they need, that they can expedite any type of request that they need. So I think that is a critical cultural thing that we have seen change in the most recent years at Verizon, for sure.
Absolutely. And we really do appreciate everything that Verizon is doing to enhance that experience. A very consumer driven organization there for sure. All right, Charlotte, over at Granicus, could you describe any trends or ideas emerging of delivering customer experience in government services?
Granicus, as you all know, is a large provider of government communication through one of our many applications called GovDelivery, which is a product that most federal agencies are most familiar with. But overall, in the last couple of years, we've been growing through a lot of acquisitions around civic technology to provide an end-to-end seamless City 2.0 per se, right? Around connected data mesh and this idea of serving the customer in one area and then remembering them throughout the journey of a city council. So, but our work in federal is primarily with GovDelivery, which is, and we're focused on this idea of tying communications and CX. And the idea is that in real life, we often associate communications with customer experience, but in government, it's a lot of silos. So I think that one of the things that I think are emerging is this idea of horizontal leadership that's happening with customer experience leaders, right? They are not just idea people or people with the brightest shiny object. No longer. It is people who have shown and demonstrated cross agency and cross-departmental collaboration over a period of time in which they've developed trust with their colleagues. And so as a software provider and a services strategy provider, we're seeing that leaders are seeing things more horizontally. And we're excited to see the CX and communication is part of that horizontal integration happening with customer experience.
Great observation on the various ideas and trending that's going on across the interagency, and we really do appreciate that insight. Amanda, I'm going to come back to you and let's talk about a specific program. You top-lined a lot of different activity going on over there. Like CMS, you're interacting with customers that are at a very sensitive time in their lives and a very delicate type of situation. We always want to make that a great experience. I know you all are working hard on that. Can you give us an example?
Absolutely. One of the things that's really affirming about working at USCIS is that people are coming to us at an inflection point, right? They're making a big decision about something that's going to change the course of their life, whether that's coming to the United States to study or to marry or to work. And one of the things I'm most proud of at USCIS is that all of our IT delivery contracts include user experience. So we have the capacity to work with the users of any system. And that's really important to me, whether that's internal or external. We're doing discovery research. We're doing usability testing. So whether it's generative or evaluative research, a big part of the day-to-day work of IT and of our delivery folks is partnering with the rest of the agency to either do usability testing and discovery research with our officers and folks that actually do the work, because those are the users of those systems, or it's getting out in front of the public, the people, our public, not necessarily other agencies' public, but the people that are potential users of USCIS systems to get a read on what would work for them and is this proposed design going to work? So in that way, OIT has been an engine of change for customer experience at USCIS. And that's really important when you're one of the biggest agencies inside of one of the biggest departments. So USCIS.gov is actually the most visited website within DHS. And so it's really important that we're continuously improving the information there, as well as the services within our account, like My USCIS, and the tools we build and maintain for our staff. And so at the end of the day, you think that this is an IT success story, but really it's a contracting success story, because that's the secret to that success, is making sure that we have that commitment from our contracting partners that we're going to do a stand-up job of bringing in the right people with the right skills on those contracts.
Very interesting catch there. Very interesting statistic there as well. And appreciate that tie-in when you're describing the partners there that oftentimes help make these things happen. Karen,
Absolutely.
how about at Verizon? Can you give us a specific example that you'd like to highlight?
Well, one of the things that I in my position is I actually do work with government and customers all of the time to introduce a lot of the things that we are doing internally at Verizon to try and translate that over to the government space. And so some of the specific ones is actually introducing ideas of combining knowledge management sources across the large variety of areas that we have. Verizon has grown as a business for over 20 years, and those are pockets of information all over the place, and consolidating those into a central place where we can provide AI to be able to provide access to our employees so that they can get all the information in one place in a centralized area. As well as on top of that, being able to put analytics on top of it and see what is being useful, what is not useful, and be able to narrow that playing field to really focus in on the projects that really move the needle.
A lot of this advanced technology certainly making that experience much richer and much deeper, and we really do appreciate you all incorporating that. Mo, how about once again up at the catbird seat? You striped across a lot of activity over there. Give a specific example that you'd like to highlight.
Of course. And before I answer your question, I just want to mention that expectations are higher than ever for service delivery, and the public is now accustomed to accessing content anywhere, anytime, and tracking orders for delivery in real time through mobile experiences. And then
As they should be.
as they should be. We
Right.
agree. And then the public comes to government, and there's often a gap. So we're working with agencies to raise the standard of government service delivery to close that gap. And one of the places we're starting with is data. I'll share an example story from one of the high impact service providers. TSA actually has a great story of how they built customer experience capacity and then responded to what they've been learning to provide solutions for their customers. So this past year has been TSA's busiest on record. They've screened over 858 million passengers, probably some of us on this call right now, and managed 7 of the top 10 highest volume passenger days in its 22-year history. So an enormous amount of volume. More people are traveling than ever, and TSA has established performance standards to hit for wait times, which are either 20 minutes or less for their standard security line, or 10 minutes or less for their pre-check line. And I think the thing to be really proud of is that they have hit these goals on average above 98% of the time across all airports in the country, 98% of the time. What we saw in 2023 reflects efforts that started 5 years prior when TSA was designated as one of the original high impact service providers. In 2019, as they got started, they designed a customer feedback survey following OMB guidance that asked about the experience going through TSA screening. The survey highlighted a number of pain points, and one of the things TSA learned is that people really don't understand when they needed to go to a secondary screening. Customer's bag would be taken off the conveyor belt, and then they wouldn't know what was going on, how long it would take, or why they got selected. After gathering more data about this, the team immediately put it into their CX action plan that they were going to do a training for officers on how to explain secondary screenings and how to respond if someone gets frustrated. At first, this training was optional, but 5 years in, now in the future, it's now part of every new hire and officer training. And that's because they had so many employees showing up, because this experience was also a pain point for them. They wanted to know what to do and how to handle these situations on their day-to-day job. And they want to be able to convey confidence when customers are confused or stressed or frustrated. So as others have noted, CX is also about employee experience. Employees are the customers too, and we want to make their experience better because that translates to customers. So TSA is now seeing the impact of these efforts in their data. They just got their data back from the 2023 feedback survey, which this year was administered in more airports and to a larger sample size than ever before. Their results showed a 20% jump in people's understanding of why they're going to secondary screening. And using this data, they then got to go brief their administrator and the 16 security directors of the airports where the survey was conducted and share that piece of data that they're most proud of, that 94% of people are confident in TSA officers to keep our air travel safe, and 93% are satisfied with their security screening experience. So our O&B team loves highlighting this story, among many others, as an example of a team that started collecting customer feedback and then took that data to design and scale up a solution. So that's the type of transformation that we're really aiming for with all of the HISPs.
Outstanding example of a fantastic implementation. We really do appreciate that. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about customer experience. We're giving some specific examples. I'm going to throw it over to Charlotte Agranicus. Tell us about some interesting ways that the agencies are using data that they currently have to improve that CX and communications.
I think that leaders at agencies are becoming very pragmatic and innovative in their approach to be innovative, right? I think that they have to do more with less and with more pressure and scrutiny than ever before. And so what I see is that they are seeking data that they've already have, and they're looking at the data that can be applied and data that is moving and data that is visible, right? So as providers of communication to the government, we have been working with government for a long time and what we have is a lot of data. And one of the examples of that is our biggest client, and actually digitally the most mature client, is CMS. And we help with their healthcare enrollments every year. And they are a testament to how they have been using data from across all the sources to get, now this year, the most number of enrollees is 21 million, I think, Ariel. 21 million people enrolled during open season to healthcare.gov using data and analytics in the background. So people may not see that, right? But we are able to work together to see that at each step of the way, they are doing A/B testing, they are doing tracking and analytics around engagement, open rates, and click rates that are all captured in the background. They are collecting geographic data and intentionally segmenting and pursuing customers, providing a personalized experience that helps them trust and consider the options, and then ultimately to enroll. So I think that I'm just in awe of sort of the innovation that leadership is taking to use those tools at hand.
Really do appreciate that example. And speaking of CMS, we're going to roll right up to Ariel. And if you could give us an example that you'd like to highlight in regards to the journey you all are on with customer experience.
Thank you for the question. And I have to say, it's so funny because as Charlotte was speaking, I wanted to highlight the how we got there behind this historic 21.3 million people.
Who's counting?
But who's counting? Who chose ACA marketplace coverage? I mean, this is unbelievable, not only when we think about the impact it has on individuals across the country at these moments that matter, it is also really remarkable in terms of how we got there. I joined CMS a few years ago. I am the first to acknowledge that when we are talking about customer experience, it's not this one project or one initiative or one win. And it's certainly not a pat on my back, so to speak, right? There have been folks at our agency working really hard to meet people where they are for decades. And so I feel very humbled to be able to pull the curtain aside a little bit and note the headlines and what you hear are wonderful. How we get there, I think, is the real story, because in the last 5 years in particular that I've had the privilege of working across our agency and beyond across government, what I have noticed is one of the secret sauces, if you will, behind the scenes is our ability at CMS to be constantly critical and pushing ourselves to deliver better, even when something may be a historic milestone. And to give you an example of this, so about 5 years ago at our agency, we started the Human-Centered Design Community of Practice. This was a group of designers, customer experience specialists, perhaps not in name, but in everything but, daily doing the work from data to communications to user research across every facet of the capability. And we brought folks together. We started with an N of 3. We suddenly saw that number creep up to, over 100 people, suddenly crept up over 300 people when we started to bring not only the individuals across our agency in the federal space, but also our partners. And that groundswell that started as a grassroots movement to make sure that we are making healthcare more human and doing that in a way that we are building ourselves up as teammates and making sure we all have the ability to ask the right questions from the outset has gotten us to a place where now we have been working on our MVP of a customer experience center of excellence. And what I want to highlight here is we made the decision that we weren't from the get-go going to set up a CX office. And the rationale behind that and why it matters is we believe that CX is part of and needs to be part of our agency's DNA, just like our focus on health equity, just like our focus on being able to make data-driven decisions. And just because we have the data and just because we may have the ability to centralize that, so to speak, the power in what we do every day is asking the right questions and making sure we're moving together. So that is, if our what is this historic number of folks who have coverage, our how is really folks that are self-organizing and then raising at the right place and time what they need at the individual contributor level across the country to say, we know that we're seeing this need on the ground and we want to make sure we not only next time around, we don't always only see it, we anticipate it.
Interesting approach to how you're implementing this capability. And it sounds like it's been quite successful based on the statistics that we're hearing about. Mo, let's talk about priorities for 2024 into the early part of the year. I know you've got some focused activity going on. What do you want to make sure gets done in 2024?
Absolutely. It's a simple answer and it's broad. It's about continuing to build accountability and transparency into everything that we do. The services in the HIS portfolio impact the entire American public, and we prioritize reporting data publicly to drive a culture of accountability around service delivery. As part of that, we're focused on supporting CX teams to get the data and research that they need in order to really invest and hone in on the right priorities to respond to the needs of the public. In some cases, it is implementing new technologies. In others, it's improving service design, or maybe it's not a major redesign or launch, but rather working with call center representatives to make it easier to answer questions that come to a help desk. And it's critical that all of us in government have a good understanding of how Americans experience federal services and whether it's getting them and us the outcomes that we're seeking, which is why we're making sure that the high impact service providers are asking for feedback. And we're also looking at when we're asking and what we're asking about. There's a difference between asking an individual about their interaction on a federal website and versus an interaction with a call center agent versus asking what problem they encountered that led them to seek out a call center agent in the first place. While a HIS could collect feedback at every interaction in the service journey, they're also balancing customer burden with the desire to gain a greater understanding, with the ultimate goal being to have the data that they need to understand and improve the customer experience. So last year, OMB simplified our guidance for how agencies should be measuring services and their improvements to continue to strike that balance. Our guidance is aimed at having HIS better implement surveys across a specific service journey, with the goal being to ask for feedback at the moments that matter most. We also want to work to reduce burden as much as possible and just ask a few critical questions to understand what's happening with our customers, to try to understand what's working. And if not, what's at the root of the problem so we can fix it.
Yeah, love the maturity on this feedback loop and the iteration that can then be introduced into a better and better experience. Karen, how about at Verizon? What's sort of the focus? What's the demand signal that you all are getting from the customer base? What's the priority for 2024?
Going along the same lines of the employee experience that I talked about before, I think part of it is really making sure that they can transition from that mobile experience to in-office experience pretty seamlessly. That is extremely important to be able to unite our kind of wireless networks and our historical wireline. Being able to bring those two teams together to really give that holistic network experience, not only internally, but externally to all of our customers. Another key aspect is really introducing security in every aspect of the network. I know we talk a lot about customer experience, and that requires a lot of ease of getting connected to your customers. But it should not be underestimated how much of a security emphasis needs to take place in every aspect of that. To ensure that you get that seamless experience, but that it's secure, that you're addressing fraud, all of those types of needs as well.
Absolutely, and we really do appreciate the laser focus, we'll call it there, on these various activities. Amanda, what is your focus for 2024? What do you want to make sure? What is the director telling you? Hey, we want to make sure this gets done in 2024.
Yeah, well, looking specifically at OIT, where I'm responsible for driving our customer experience and user experience operations, I'm really excited about several things. One is continuing to drive more collaboration around our user research process. And so we have all these teams, and they're all really concerned about uncovering insights about their tools. But we learn a lot about other people's tools in the process, because we're talking to folks about, the website, but they want to tell us about the logged in experience. And those are actually different teams. How do we get that feedback back and forth, right? So some of that includes standardizing around a central tool that can help us share insights across teams, even outside of IT. Because I want to get that information back to the different operational directorates and talk to them about how that impacts them. But probably the biggest priority from a change management point of view is our pivot to a new design tool. So we have some inconsistencies based on what teams came on board with who's using what tools. But there's also been some changes in the design space recently with some acquisitions in the private sector and things like that have forced us to re-examine our processes. And so we're really driving toward unified tooling for designing, prototyping, and now design system management. M2322 came out last year. And so that's shaking up our space. And I guess a lot of folks don't realize that there's a legal requirement to use the US web design system on all your public facing web stuff. And that's really so that people have a consistent experience. And one of the things that we've struggled with is when you're on a non-logged in web property like uscis.gov, and then you go to log into something like My USCIS, we want that to be a very seamless experience. We want you to feel like you're still on the same website. You shouldn't have to understand our organizational silos when you go from one part of our website to another part of our website. But it's really hard to do because those are two different teams working in two different front-end technologies and things like that. And so we can manage that by using tooling and by using techniques like adhering to a design system. But we've been waiting for the tooling to kind of catch up to be able to support things like that. So we're working really hard to be able to support our teams having access to technology to be able to support that. And I am super excited because FY24 is our year. We're going to be aligning around that finally this year. And FY25 is going to be the year that we really see that take off. So finally, I'm excited to continue to look for new ways to improve what we're doing generally, including looking at participant incentives and trauma-informed approaches to design, which are very hot topics in the space right now. And I think that toward the end of this calendar year, we're going to really start to look at those after we see the dust settle on those kinds of things. But those are really specific initiatives that I am very excited are so close that we can talk about in that level of detail.
And we really are looking forward to it and appreciate everything that you all are doing. Charlotte, Grandica's sitting in a very unique situation there, very unique position. Curious to know how our organization's managing digital program adoption or communicating complex policies or procedures to the public.
I think that digital transformation is adding unique challenges to the way that people experience government. If you add another channel, it's actually another risk on miscommunicating, right? So
Mhm.
I think that there's two things that are happening as more digital transformation happens, is that we are insisting that with digital transformation, the experience should be better than it was in person, instead of, I say, carbon copying the brick and mortar experience into digital, right? And a way to do that very honestly with a high, ROI is more communications, right? So two things we always say: guiding the journey and managing expectations. These are things that can't happen in brick and mortar experiences as much, but in digital world, you can constantly manage expectations and guide the journey. And I think so that we're looking at and insisting agencies look at the speed to service delivery, right? While there is major transformation happening with amazing efforts going on, the people experiencing it on the outside are still experiencing the same thing. And if not, with change, more confusion. So with that, with the speed of delivery and then the change management of it all, it insists and requires agencies to really be questioning or perhaps considering a more creative option to bring people along. And last year, we talked a lot about awareness. Like, if people don't even know about this program, does it, is it successful? It ultimately, if people have actually now trust and considered and has taken decision and action, even for, like, let's say a job application, and they don't hear from us after they've submitted, right? We lose people, and we lose people in a lot of perhaps trust breaking ways, like anxiety and mistrust. And did it send? Do they care about me? And it feels in our world, there are ways with communications you can wrap the digital transformation while it's happening internally to immediately alleviate the anxiety of confusion, of misinformation, of disjointed information, of change to customers fast through communications channels. And I do want to give a statistic. Last year, the federal government sent 12 billion emails and sent about 147 million SMS messages in our perspective. Now, we are not the only provider, but we are a major provider. And so it's really interesting to see that email and SMS is where it comes down to, right? On the way that people prefer to be, and actually sometimes can only be reached at through SMS. So I think we're looking at low-hanging opportunities to immediately alleviate anxiety for customers as major transformation is happening. And of course, the use of existing data to guide the journey and manage expectations for people who have already engaged and decided to engage with you.
Interesting, and a great focus on a variety of priorities there. And it's almost like the old sort of age-old mistake of a lift and shift type concept, but you're sort of bringing it to a CX paradigm, if you will, and certainly don't want to take old policies, old procedures, old experiences, and then roll it into a new environment, expect anything better to happen. So we really do appreciate the priority focus there. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about customer experience, specifically talking about priorities for 2024. Ariel, priorities for you over at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Absolutely. So our number one priority from the experience perspective this year is measurement. And I want to get a little personal on that, because when we talk about customer experience measurement or measurement in general, Mo alluded to this around, how do we move beyond compliance? How do we make this matter? How do we measure what matters? I'm just coming back from maternity leave. And so I have an almost 4-month-old, and I have the unbelievable opportunity of working at CMS at this point in time, where just a couple of years ago, federal employees did not have paid leave to the extent that we do now. The Pump Act did not exist, but now it does. And so as an employee and executive at CMS, it is not lost on me what it means to see and notice these moments that matter in our lives as humans first, in our work lives, and make sure that we do not leave that at the door when we are writing policies, when we are implementing programs, and when we are interacting with each other and with the public. And while I was on maternity leave, it was very, very frankly surprising to me what the experience is in the US today of having a child in America. And I am not going to get on a soapbox on that topic at this moment in time. There will be a place and time, but I have way deeper appreciation and empathy for the focus that particularly we've had at CMS on improving the experience of having a child in the US, and also want to acknowledge one of our interagency life experiences where we are focused on birth of a child through age 5 in the US. To bring this back to the priority of measuring experience, in my own experience of going to many visits with providers, with care team members, cobbling together the most curated experience that I could possibly imagine as a designer at heart, I myself still struggled to figure out what information I needed and when, where I could get support. And I can only imagine what that is like for people who don't have my seat at the table at our organization and in government. And so, to me, what customer experience measurement really means is we move beyond the thousands of surveys at every point in time. We move beyond the constant barrage of text messages and emails and phone calls and going into the office for every single visit when we may or may not live close enough to even make that feasible. And we take a step back, not only in our agency at CMS, but as a whole of government, and say, how do we make sure that we are driving towards having the best health outcomes in the world? Because we need to be the most aspirational organization and organizations in the country so that everybody else comes with us, and so that we keep up, especially with our partners in the private sector. One other thing I want to note here is, in terms of brass tacks, measurement can mean lots of things. So at CMS, we are focused in both the public facing realm through our HISP. So we publicly report in the performance.gov arena on each of our high impact services, as Mo mentioned. We are also, as I mentioned, at the department level, leaning into this agency priority goal. We are looking to translate as best as possible these moments that matter in the life experiences in a public facing way through our employee experience as well. So what that means is there's an organizational health memo that all departments received, and the intent there is to also measure the experience of our organizations. And so CMS is saying it's not enough for us to, again, check a box. We need to be really living this. And my hope is that, as one of my former bosses said in the private sector, and it forever stuck with me, is there are many ways to measure these points and measure success. But once you get to a place where you're an organization like CMS and you have both the influence and the responsibility to the public and to your workforce, you need to pay attention to measuring success also by the stories we tell. Meaning, it's not about stories of marketing, to be clear. This is the stories we tell to our children and to our grandchildren of what health can be like in this country.
Amen. Well said. And we really do appreciate it. We're going to zoom through the top lesson learned that you'd like to impart on the audience. Mo, I'm going to start with you.
So repeating a similar theme from myself and from others on the panel, let data lead the way, especially data from your customers. We talk a lot about the VA as a great example for using CX data, and over the past decade, they've demonstrated how customer feedback can be a way to detect early warning signs and look under the surface for clues. that may indicate there's trouble ahead. We talk a lot about digital data and other data, but this example really talks about data that led to an in-person solution. So the VHA conducted some research about wayfinding that veterans and their caregivers would visit one of the VA hospitals for their appointments, and they just couldn't figure out where to go because the buildings are confusing. And it wasn't a new app or an expensive signage that evolved and solved this problem. It was a human being standing at the front, a VA employee with a recognizable red coat, like the Walmart greeter, that would make eye contact with the person walking in, to the veteran and their families, and say, "Welcome. How can I help you find the right office or appointment?" It's really simple, but it's a clear example that captures why we need to start with data and research to help agencies invest in the right ways. It's not to say that technology can't make extraordinary improvements, but that it's important to be able to discern what type of intervention is actually needed. And in some cases, it's service design with a really human element that makes the difference.
Yeah, and sometimes it's very simple, and sometimes all you need is a little bit of MacGyver thinking to improve these experiences. Amanda.
I think at this point, yeah, we've all heard somebody say, we need to find allies. But what I would say is it's not just that we need to have allies, it's that we need to find a shared vocabulary. And someone might be familiar with lean, they might be familiar with continuous process improvement. We can't be so dogmatic with our language and with using the right words that we don't actually find a shared understanding with these folks. So, continuous process improvement is pretty much what we do, sure, but just make sure that you're getting that qualitative research where you're going out and talking to people into that continuous process improvement. That's it. That's the game. Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be. And the same with all these other frameworks. Let's just meet people where they are and keep going, because what matters is that we're getting customer voices into the processes that people already know and love. Let's not be too dogmatic about it. That's what I would say.
Absolutely, and very much appreciated. Ariel, top lesson learned that you would like to impart on our community.
So I love what Amanda just said, and I would actually push this further, because I know that when we set the bar really high, right, the intention is not to always reach it, but to just get a little closer. I don't think it's enough to have stories alone. I don't think it's enough to have voices embedded from a user research perspective alone across our product, services, programs, policies. We need to close the loop. We need to say what changed. We need to communicate that to the people that we're serving. And we need to get to a place where it's so obvious, the change, that we are able to see people's lives get better from what they choose to lift up and how they choose to interact with us. That's something that at CMS, again, I'm so proud of what we've accomplished. We're one of the most mature agencies in our customer experience program. And yet we still absolutely have work to do in making sure that we're closing that loop. And we're saying, we learned this, we have this actionable insight. This is what we did. This is what it changed. And this is why it matters.
Really do appreciate that. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up. But before we do, we always like to talk about 2 years out. Charlotte, we're going to start with you. We're going to fast forward 2 years from now. And what's the thinking going to be at that point? What's it going to look like? What is the experience, no pun intended, going to be at that point in time?
I think that with the trends being that leaders are applying a lot of strategy to assets they already have, the acceleration and momentum will be faster. And I think that using and connecting the bridge, as we said, around horizontal leadership, connecting these bridges and having leaders who are truly collaborative will lead to experiences that are not just digitally transformed online, but across all the channels. And so I think that the hope and the anticipation I have for customer experience is that with more leveraging of digital tools, as we talked about, customers will feel respected, reminded, responded to, and remembered throughout the journey, and in ways that are clever and innovative and not so slow to deliver.
Good point on the catch on the slow to deliver. So we really do appreciate that, and very good insights. Thank you very much for all that you all are doing. Karen, Verizon, fast forward 2 years. What's cooking?
I think the biggest thing is, as we talk about technology vendors and capabilities. It's changing the conversation from capabilities to business outcomes and really defining that on the business side as opposed to letting the technology drive the conversation. And once you get alignment at the senior levels and can fulfill that down to the all of the different departments, what are we trying to achieve? How do we try and get there? And getting those definitions clearly defined, the technology kind of just comes naturally. And holding your technology vendors accountable to achieving those goals, I think is critical in the future.
Thank you very much, and we really do appreciate it. Ariel, fast forward 2 years from now, I'm 84 years old. I don't have a lot of support. Maybe English isn't my first language. What's that experience going to be? You shared some very touching moments about your own personal journey. What do we expect to see 2 years from now?
So I think two things from that, again, external perspective that you just framed, and then also internal for employee experience. So externally, I think that the word trust right now is front and center for better experiences. In 2 years, I want us to get to a place at CMS where we are not talking about customer experience and digital experience as these discrete items, or again, as a project, as a program, but that we're getting to substance and able to measure what we have delivered that makes the people we serve trust our health system more. And to me, that is important because it means that for that person that you just described who is seeking care, we can't be the beginning and the end of the funnel, so to speak, right? We're a part of a continuum of experience, just as we talk about continuum of care. So let's perfect warm handoffs, not only between our programs, but also between agencies and local communities where ultimately rubber meets the road. And I would say, if I may, just on the internal side for employee experience, my hope in 2 years is that every single person at CMS can articulate what our top 3 needs for the people we serve in our respective areas are. Because if we can do that, then we have really gotten folks to wear their heart on their sleeve every day, regardless of their role.
Always need to think about that during the handoffs, the data exchange, et cetera. The common denominator is the customer, is the employee. So we really do appreciate the focus there. Amanda, you sort of hinted at 24 and certainly 25. Let's push you from 25 to 26.
I think, it's really tough to say. I had a year's service in the federal government the last time we had an administration change, and I don't really know what that meant, but we had seen customer experience come to the forefront in such a major way over the last 3 years of the current administration. Of course, this work precedes the current administration through things like the HIS program, like Mo has talked about, but also laws like the PRA and 21st Century IDEA. So when I think about whether the administration changes or not, I think that this idea that people deserve easy to navigate websites and clear form instructions and data-informed decision-making isn't going anywhere, because we've seen it work, right? So whether it's fewer calls to the call center because people can find what they need online, or a faster time to decision because we clarified those form instructions and reduced the amount of people bringing documents we asked for in the form instructions to their interview, these specific improvements we make will keep coming down to priorities and just ruthless prioritization. And so at the end of the day, I think that customer experience really comes down to how you position it. And we're just going to have to keep making sure that this is a data-led approach that drives us to our goals, and keeping on with our sensing and responding as the needs and the operating environment shift. So all I can really say for certain is I think we're going to be in a better place than we are now.
And as you've described and others have said, the customer base is expecting it, they're requiring it, they're demanding it, quite frankly. And I think that's fair. Mo, take us home here 2 to 3 years from now, as we're looking across the spectrum. What's the expectation in regards to across the federal service and the delivery of goods and services, not only to the citizens, but again, to the employees as well?
So for us, it's really that trust in government increases, full stop. That vision is etched into the title of the CX executive order and in our emphasis on data reporting and accountability. And like Ariel and Amanda mentioned earlier, increasing trust in government includes making sure that our customers and employees can feel these changes and see that they are being heard and that their needs are being met. The thesis is that when people trust the government, they will seek out services and support, they will receive what they need, and quality experiences will further bolster trust. To say more briefly, one of the major goals of this administration's CX work is to design services from the perspective of Americans' actual life experiences and not based on bureaucracy. To support that, and Ariel mentioned this as well, senior leaders across government identified 5 life experiences initiatives in 2022. And these events, shared by millions of Americans every year, represent a cross-section of the kinds of services that government provides that include approaching retirement, facing a financial shock, recovering from a disaster, having a child in early childhood, and navigating the transition from military service to civilian life. So these experiences are some of many that are really interesting moments of transition and decision, as Amanda was saying. And in these moments, an individual might seek or qualify for support from 3 to 4 different government agencies with different application processes and different qualifications and data needs and things to submit. And this can be confusing and scary, adding to rather than alleviating the burden that people feel when they're at their most stressed or vulnerable or in times of great change and excitement. And as President Biden says, you shouldn't have to know how to know. And that is, again, this sort of mantra that we use to march to every day. These initiatives represent systems change, a totally new way of delivering for Americans, of putting inputs from human beings and stories alongside other data, and really meeting people where they are in these very meaningful moments. And again, that big goal, that big sign of success is that we see increases in trust in government. And 2 years from now, 10 years from now, we want to maintain and continue to push that limit.
And we really appreciate the mantra of meeting people where they are. And I want to thank every one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for this program. Not just today, what you did yesterday and what you're going to do tomorrow. We really do appreciate it. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make this program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum, part of the Federal News Network.